everyone, welcome back to episode 117 of Talk of Fame podcast with your host, Kylie Montini. I'm so excited to have on Red Bull Air Force member, skydiving coach, and host 15 world records and 5 world titles, Amy Chmelecki. Did I get it right or got it wrong?
Yeah, so that was pretty good. It's Chmelecki.
Yeah, amazing. So thank you so much for coming on, and I'm so honored to speak with you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So I wanted to ask you, you started skydiving at the age of 13. You found an interest in starting basically skydiving professionally. Like, how did you find an interest in skydiving of all the different sports?
So when I was very young, I heard two women talking about it, and it put the thought in my head that I had this vision that I could do flips and I could just keep doing flips. And it was something I was really drawn to. It was almost like a feeling of freedom that was drawing me to it. And at that at a very, very young age, when I heard about those women, I don't even know who they are, but they changed my life completely.
Mhm.
It planted the seed in my head, and I decided I wanted to do it from that point on.
That's amazing. Like who, like, did you see someone skydiving that made you want to become a skydiver, or is this like an instant, like, oh, I want to become a skydiver?
I must have seen it somewhere because I understood when I heard people talking about it, but not. I don't have a particular vision in my head of something I saw, but I very much remember hearing about these women, and it put a vision in my head. At the time I started skydiving, a movie came out called Point Break, and it was. They've recently put out a sequel, but the original was a really exciting movie at the time with skydiving in it. And I think that definitely kind of like continued the stoke for me about actually skydiving.
Mm-hmm. And like I read something like you couldn't start skydiving until you're 18, right?
Yes, in the United States, you have to be 18 because you have to legally sign a lot of documents where you basically agree that you're waiving your rights to sue people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get hurt, you can't sue the skydiving industry. You're basically agreeing that you're taking the responsibility on yourself. And in the US, you have to be 18 for those documents to be legal.
Mm-hmm. And like I was so interested. I'm like, I didn't know like you had to be 18. Like I know some sports don't like legalize those type of things, but like when I saw skydiving, I'm like, really? Like that's a thing? Like it's crazy. And so
Yeah, it's
like when I want to ask you, like when you first started as a skydiver, how did you kind of train and maintain to become a professional skydiver? Like I know many people kind of train different ways.
So when I first started, or before I started, I didn't think that it was something you can do, that it could actually be part of your life. But the moment when I walked on a skydiving facility, I saw these people kind of doing it, and you could tell they were doing like it was something you could do. So I thought, oh man, I'm going to do this for sure. And every skydiving facility has similar programs, but they vary a little bit. But the basic idea is you start with a tandem. So you go and you're attached to the skydiving instructor while you're in free fall. It's a very nice introduction to skydiving. And that's what I recommend to everybody for their first time. And if you like it, after that, you'll know. Some people just really know that they're going to continue doing it. You do a program, it's called accelerated free fall. There's some different names for it, but the basic idea is you have your own equipment. You're renting that equipment from the skydiving facility, and instructors are with you. They're on either side of you. There's lots of ground school before your first jump. So you're pretty much in the classroom all day before your first jump with your own parachute equipment on. And then you go for a jump. The first jump's basic, very basic. You have to pull your parachute.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, as long as you pass that level, you move on to the next level. And each level gets a little bit more difficult. And you have instructors with you the whole time. Eventually, you only have one instructor instead of two instructors with you. And to get your license, your A license, you have to do 25 jumps. And within those 25 jumps, you have to do make sure you check certain boxes, like to prove that you can land your parachute and that you can basically be safe and save your own life skydiving.
Like, what was like the hardest kind of part for you when trying to to follow all those rules? It's obviously when you have to become a professional skydiver, it takes years and years of practice to maintain and become a good skydiver. Like, how did you like basically like get all those things like at the checklist?
Yeah, the hardest part for me was paying for it all. It was
I feel that. I
really
feel that.
it was really expensive. And people write to me all the time and they're like, I have no money. How do I do it? And I'm like, you get 4 jobs.
Wait,
And
did you get 4 jobs?
I worked nonstop. And then it was a little bit less than ideal the way I did it because my each skydive I did was spread out over at least 2 weeks. Usually it was more like 4 weeks because I would kind of have to save up money to pay for the next jump. So I worked different jobs. I had a job in the day and then a job on the night and another job on the weekend. And then I did like contracting little random jobs here and there. So I was hustling for sure because I didn't have money. I was in college. I was broke. Um, yeah, so it definitely is expensive. The other way you can do it is kind of save up a bunch of money and then go for a week or 2 weeks to a skydiving facility. A lot of the way young people that don't have access to a lot of money do it these days is they'll go work at an indoor skydiving facility, or you could go work at a skydiving facility, which is eventually what I ended up doing to get the amount of skydives to get kind of good enough where people started to hire me and I could work more professionally as a skydiver. I did some funny jobs at a skydiving facility.
Like, where can like people like mostly find places? Is there any Pacific states you can like find skydiving like lessons or anything about skydiving? Because I know like you moved out to Arizona for skydiving, right?
Yeah, so Arizona is a really great place because we have sunshine all year long.
Mhm.
So you need good weather, you need sunshine, and also it's very good when it's open space and when there aren't a lot of people. So really you can see forever where I live. It's very open. There's not a lot here. I would never want to live here if I wasn't a skydiver. Because
I
it's
feel
pretty
that it's
boring
better
otherwise.
than being in the cold during the winter because I'm in Pennsylvania and it's absolutely freezing right now.
Yeah, I grew up in the Northeast, so I totally know what you mean. But there's a governing body for skydiving in the United States. It's called the United States Parachute Association, or the USPA for short. And USPA.org is the website, and they have all of the skydiving facilities listed on there for each state. So I go on there all the time. Like if I'm going to a state and I need to find a skydiving facility, that's where I go, and they have them all listed there. So they are everywhere. There's skydiving facilities all over the country. Some states have a lot more, like there's a lot in Florida and there's a lot in California and maybe less in Alaska. I think maybe there's one in Alaska, but they're pretty much everywhere.
That's amazing. And like a couple of years back, you signed with Red Bull Air Force. Like what like why like what was like the process like kind of sign with Red Bull? Like what was something about them that made you want to kind of be part of their team?
Red Bull is such a wonderful company. What I really love about Red Bull is they want to know from each of their athletes and their employees too, the people in their sales department or the various departments that make that company run. They find out really what the talent and skill is and desires and kind of passions of each of the people that work for them, and then they build on that. And so everybody is really stoked. Everyone's always stoked in Red Bull, and it helps that we're drinking Red Bull all the time too. But they kind of we have meetings every year, and they ask me, okay, what are you doing this year? Like, where did your passions lead you this year, and what kind of projects? So they kind of build on the things that I'm already excited about. And that's just really great because you're always happy to go to work. You're always stoked. You never really feel like you're working because you're doing stuff that you want to do.
And like in November 2022, you and an all-woman team broke the world's vertical and world record, right?
Yes, so fun. So fun.
It,
It was an event. Go ahead. Sorry.
no, you're good. You can keep talking.
Yeah, it was such a great event. It was called Project 19, and it was inspired by the women's suffrage movement in the
Hmm.
United States. So in 1920, women got the right to vote in the United
Hmm.
States. And the centennial was in 2020. That was originally when we were supposed to do it. But because of COVID, we postponed it to 2022. The history of the suffrage movement is so rich. And most people would find this very, very hard to believe. But women almost didn't get the right to vote. It
Hmm.
came down to a couple votes in the Congress in Tennessee. And it really, though it was one vote, it came down to one vote in Tennessee that changed the course of history for women in the United States. And you would think, what, there's no way that women, you couldn't have the right to vote in the United States as a woman. But it really was a fight for these women.
Hmm.
So we were really inspired by that movement and the
Hmm.
history and those women, and we wanted to honor them by doing the world record.
That's so cool. And like with the women's rights movement, like that, like 4 years ago, before even when women got the right to vote, like you had a civil rights movement, we had Martin Luther King's speech, like there was so many things back then, especially with women right to vote. And a lot of people back then thought like, oh my God, a woman can't vote. They just need to do the housework. And like, why does women have a matter to say in the government? You know what I mean? That's like a man's job. These men back then were only kind of like we're the only people that have a say in government. You know what I mean? And like with the event, like what made you like what was the event like what made you kind of want people to take out of the event, especially since it was a celebration of the 19th Amendment and the right to vote. Like, what did you want people to leave out of that event to watch and say, like, oh my God, what should I do? Like, what do you want people to kind of take away from that event, especially of the 19th Amendment?
Yeah, there were two main things that we were hoping to accomplish in that event. One of them was through honoring the history of the suffrage movement, really encouraging people to take part in that right. It's a right that we all have. And when you use your voice, that's really how using your vote is how you use your voice. And when people decide not to vote, a lot of people strategically don't want people to vote because that's
Mm-hmm.
how they get what they want done in the world. So
Mm-hmm.
it's so important that we all vote, and it comes down sometimes to a few votes. So it really makes a difference. So we're hoping people are inspired to vote from our project. And then the second thing is we hope that women and girls are inspired to live boldly and bravely in their own way. So it
Mm-hmm.
might not mean skydiving. It could mean anything that's important to you, but or anything that you feel drawn or passionate about. But to really push through any fears or doubts, and to kind of break down those walls of thinking, no, I can't do that because my family told me I can, or society told me I
Mm-hmm.
can't.
Yeah, and like with the first thing you said, like with women right to vote and people voting elections, like Gen Z and the kids in my generation rarely vote. It's mostly Gen X or people like the adults voting and the kids really don't give like kind of don't really care about voting since they're like, oh my God, like government's boring, like why do I have a say? But like especially women and girls, like women and girls don't really think they should do anything because people all will often say like, oh my God, like you can't do that, like you said, like, oh, I can't do that, or I'm not talented enough, but you should try. Like who cares what people say? Like I had self-doubters in my life, like everyone does. Like even if you have self-doubters, it's just makes you stronger to keep going, right?
Yeah, I think it's very easy to take for granted the the things that surround us and make our lives special, and some until they're gone. So it there are but through voting or not voting, uh, things can change, and you don't have to understand like and think and know everything about politics to go out there and vote, but paying attention a bit and just understanding that by voting it really does, and understanding what the different people you're voting for, and also the not just the people you're voting for, but any kind of ballot measures, any things that that might be important that can really change your life. And it by paying attention a little bit and going out there and voting, it's so important, because all of a sudden something might change that you just breaks your heart and makes you feel so upset. Eh, but if you had paid attention, and maybe if the masses had paid attention in voting, it could have easily gone a different way.
Yeah, and like I like most recently you have been inducted into the skydiving Hall of Fame. Like what was that like? Like I have to ask you, like being inducted into a Hall of Fame, like come on, like that's crazy.
I agree with you. It was crazy. And I have trouble sometimes processing exactly how I feel about that. Um, Happy for sure. I feel happy and excited and honored. It truly, truly is an honor of a lifetime for me. It was something I wasn't expecting. And I very, very much appreciated it. It was really special. My whole family was there when I got inducted. And yeah, it's
It's
great.
amazing. You're like, how do you like kind of strive to keep doing professional skydiving? Because as you get older, some people like don't really like you're like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore, or you're like, well, like I'm getting older, like how am I supposed to do this? Like how do you like still like strive to do it? Like I mean it has to be hard.
Yeah, I have changed the way that I approach skydiving. When I was younger, I was competing, I was skydiving as much as I could every day. I would fly in the indoor skydiving facility 15 minutes in the morning, do 12 skydives in the day, and then fly in the indoor skydiving facility 15 minutes again at night. And then I would go to the gym, and I was not making any money because I was really just like training. I had sponsors that were helping me pay for things, but I was very broke. But I didn't care. And I was working hard, and my body was, when I was 20, I could push myself that hard. And now that I'm a little bit older, I've had to change my strategy to I do more. I have this skill set that I've built over the years for a couple decades when I was younger. And now my strategy is a little bit more where it's a little bit less about quantity and pushing the limits in competition. And it's more about quality and
Mhm.
creating things that are visually appealing, and also creating things that kind of make a difference. So the projects that I do maybe involve lots of work on the ground, planning it, and 5 jumps versus 1,000 jumps of training for one competition,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, like it with towards like the last question, like How has kind of like your physical self changed over the course of your career? Because obviously, as time goes on, like your mentality kind of like breaks down and like you're tired and you're exhausted. Like, how has like your like self changed like since like when you first started out in your career?
So I definitely am more I've always been really careful. Safety is always very, very important to me. But as you get older, and things like if you get a little bit injured, you need more downtime. It takes longer to heal than when you were younger. So I'm just more careful. I always say, like, when I'm jumping with other people, I always want to jump with people that are in their 40s or 50s or older, because they really understand where I'm coming from, where sometimes young people go really hard and I'm like, oh, slow down a little bit because you don't want to get hurt. But because when you get hurt, it definitely, like I could do something really little, like I could maybe tweak my shoulder just a little bit, but it stays with me a lot longer than it used to. So I
Mm-hmm.
definitely am a little more tired than I used to be, but the stoke and the love that I have for skydiving has not changed. I love it so much. I love what I do in the sport still, and it's changed. I used to want to go to the skydiving facility and do as many jumps as I could every day. Now I'm not interested in doing that. I'd rather plan really, really special things in beautiful locations that have meaning and purpose behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still one of my favorite things to do.
Mm-hmm. Like, do you like plan on like taking a break or with skydiving anytime soon, or you just plan on going on every single day and skydiving?
I generally don't take too many breaks, but I don't really plan breaks too much. If I were to have like the most perfect vacation, like a dream vacation, it would probably involve skydiving. So skydiving is kind of also what I really love to do. And I don't know how long I'll do it for. It's a good question. I will do it as long as I can.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
And so, like in your career, you have won 7 national titles, 4 world titles, and broken 17 world records, which is amazing. Like, how did you manage to win these titles? Is the question. Like, how did you manage to do all these things?
A lot of training and also hustling for sponsors and people to help you kind of pay for your training. So and finding teammates as well. There's different types of skydiving that you can compete in. So some of the competitions are from when you exit the airplane. So you exit and you go through free fall, and then you open your parachute. So that time between exiting the plane and opening your parachute, depending on how fast you're falling, is about 60 seconds. So a lot of the competition I've done had to do with that portion of time, in free fall. Sometimes you can compete once your parachute opens, there's competitions. But basically, it's just like any other sporting event. If you want to be good, or if you want to be the best at it, you have to train really, really hard. You have to train harder and better and more focused than the next person.
Mm-hmm. Like, what is like the some like challenges like you like kind of done? And like, did you have like any accidents while trying to do some things like while in air?
I've had small injuries. Maybe I've twisted my knee before because I kind of landed hard. I have had a lot of wear and tear. Most skydivers develop shoulder problems. So I have 20,000 skydives, and sometimes I am amazed that I feel as good as I do, for that many skydives. I did break in my ankle once. I had a collision with someone while I was in free fall. That was pretty scary. I was much younger. I was, I think, 24 or 25 when that happened. So that was pretty scary, but I've never had anything really serious happen to me. And I think that's part because I I really deeply respect the line, and I am very happy to say no to something if I think it's unsafe. But it also had to do with luck. I
Mm-hmm.
think I think some people think skydiving is way more dangerous than it is, but with that said, it's still jumping out of planes and it has its inherent dangers. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
things can go wrong even when you've done everything right. And in
Mm-hmm.
that sense, I've been very lucky. Nothing terrible has happened.
Mm-hmm. And let's hope nothing bad happens in the future.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, like you, as we talked about Red Bull Air Force team before, you are the first and only female member on the team. Like, what are like some things you kind of have faced as the only female member?
So when throughout my whole career in skydiving, and it, I think you have to do this whether you're a man or a woman, but you kind of have to strategize the way that you communicate and approach situations. I think a lot of times women will develop navigation skills through groups of men, and they don't even realize that they're doing it. But when I first started skydiving, the way that skydiving looked, the way that it was represented in videos now, it was like VHS tapes. I'm not sure
Mhm.
if you know what that is, but like it was like okay. So, but women were really objects to look at versus the athletes. The women were in these videos, not skydiving, but just attempting to look pretty. A
Mhm.
lot of times you wouldn't even see their heads, and they were often washing things. It was very weird the way women were represented. And it pissed me off a lot. I was young, I was just out of college, and I wanted to change it, and I was ready to change it. And I was angry. And when I first went to a skydiving facility, when I moved out here to Skydive Arizona, I expressed my anger and my dissent to that kind of imagery and representation of women. And I quickly got pushed away. Like nobody wanted me around because I was very aggressive with the way that I expressed myself and how I felt about the way women were being represented in the sport. So I realized at a very young age that I had to change my strategy of how I talked to people and acted in order to get in.
Mhm.
I had to kind of relax. I never sacrificed any of my core values or morals. I would People understood that I preferred videos not to be the way they were, but I wasn't as in their face and aggressive with it. I was a little bit more relaxed in my approach. And it was a strategy I had to take in order, I felt, in order to be accepted in the community. And now that I have this kind of resume behind me and so many accomplishments, I am more vocal about the way I think women should be represented. And it was definitely a strategy that I had to take. And I'm constantly kind of navigating through waters like that. Like, okay, people don't always want like the woman to bust in the room and take over everything. So I just
Mhm.
have to do it a little slowly, but still do it, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. And so like the last thing I like have for you is like what is some advice for people, especially young women that have just started out as a skydiver or want to be a skydiver but want to make it into a career?
So I think that each person has certain passions that they're drawn to, or skill sets or assets that maybe will help them. So I think that the way that what each person can kind of build on their own skill sets and passions. For instance, maybe with you having a love for producing podcasts, it's something that you're drawn to, and you can utilize that within skydiving. So kind of build on the things that you are already passionate about, and try and make your mark surrounded by things that you already like. It's similar to what Red Bull does. They don't just tell us we have to do this and this and this. They find out what we want to do and what we're passionate about, and then they build on that. Like if somebody is really good at programming or video editing, you can use those skills within skydiving to kind of work within the sport. There's a lot more than you can do than, it's not just skydiving. So maybe you're teaching people how to skydive, or maybe you are creating art within skydiving. So I think you just take like what you like and go for it. But most of all, you have to do what you want, and don't let anybody else tell you what you need to do and what you should do. My whole life, my father would say, "All right, Amy, when are you going to get a job? When are you going to have kids?" And I never wanted either of those things. And I didn't want the life that he wanted for me. And I had to just tell him that I'm doing what I want, Dad. I
Mhm.
love you and I respect you, but I'm doing what I want. And now he's super proud of me, and he's learned from the life that I've lived. So you
It's
just got to
amazing.
do what you want to do.
Yeah, it's just sometimes like people always expect you to do some things, and like with like you just need to follow your own path. Like that's something that I had to struggle with growing up, and this is like you just need to follow what you want, not what other people want.
And I think also when you're young, you might not always know what you want. I remember people used to tell me all the time, just be yourself, just be yourself. And I never really understood what that meant. I was like, I don't know what that means. Because I was trying different things, I was discovering who I was. So I think you should try, don't be afraid to fail and to try things, and you might not like it, and then that's how you learn, is by trying things. So we're all going to make mistakes, but
Hmm.
that's how we learn. So just get out there and try things, and in that process you're going to discover more and more what you want and where your passions are. And maybe something will come along and it just kind of pulls you in. That's what skydiving did to me.
I love that. So I just want to thank you so much for coming, taking some time out of your day to come on a podcast. I love speaking with you. You're so amazing, and I'm so glad me and you got the chance to speak. And it's absolutely been an honor to speak with you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
You are very welcome. Thank you so much.
Of course. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.